Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're finally coming to the end of this long chapter 6 in the book of Jeremiah, where we've seen a whole series of oracles of judgment and condemnation and chastening against God's people. He is sending the Babylonians against them to try and refine them and bring them back from their ways. But from verse 27 on, we've seen an oracle with the imagery of the smelting process, Jeremiah as a tester and assayer of metals. And instead of God's word producing a good response, instead of finding gold and silver, it has revealed nothing but impurity and slag and worthless ore. So we're going to come now to our final conclusion in this verse. It's a pretty easy verse to translate, even if the conclusion is difficult. Let's read it in Hebrew as we get started. Kesef nim'as kareu lahem, ki ma'as Adonai bahem. So kesef nim'as. Well, what do we have here? Kesef, you probably know that word. That means silver. Silver, nim'as. What we have here is a participle. It's masculine plural, masculine singular participle, and it's a nifal, which is why you have this nun prefix right at the very beginning, and from the verb ma'as, which means to reject. So this would be the adjective rejected. So rejected silver, they call, or they have called. What do we have here? This is a perfect. This is a third common plural, a cow from a verb kara, meaning to call or to name something. They call to them, actually probably meaning they call them, they name them. This is a metaphor, the way you would normally express that. They name them. So rejected silver, they, meaning men in general probably, or even more of a passive sense, they are called. They call them. So this is what the people are recognized to be by the others who are looking at them, including God and the prophet himself. They are rejected silver. Why? Because Yahweh has rejected perfect 3ms, and frequently taking its direct object with the verb, with the marker, the preposition beit, and then hem suffix, which is our 3mp suffix. Because the Lord has rejected them. That's why they rejected silver, because of their own hardness of heart that we see over and over throughout the chapter 6 here. Pretty straightforward. Well, let's go ahead and hide our work here. Look at just a couple of translations very quickly. The NIV. They are called rejected silver, so they've made this, they call them, into a passive, which is a proper way when you have sort of an indefinite 3mp, third common plural over here. Rejected silver, they are called rejected silver because the Lord has rejected them. The New Jerusalem Bible puts it just a little bit differently. Silver reject. Almost a direct translation there. Men call them. Now you don't have the word men, but they. That's more of a general sense. Men call them. And indeed, put that development of the little key there. And indeed, for and indeed, Yahweh has rejected them. And then finally, just one more with the Good News Bible, today's English version. More of a paraphrase a little bit, but they will be called worthless dross, rejected silver, because the refining process with the lead, as we saw in the previous verse, 29, produced nothing. The lead was all used up, and it was still full of impurity. So they are worthless dross. They will be called. Now, they've put this more into a future, or you actually have more of a past or a present sense here, but the future, you can understand it in the context. It's not strictly speaking the case, but certainly does apply. Because I, the Lord, now they've made this into a first person as well. Now that is not in the text. It's the Lord has rejected, but they're in this paraphrase that the Good News Bible is using, they're bringing it back as though the Lord himself is speaking, and in a sense he is through the prophet Jeremiah. But this is more a paraphrase, not a translation. Because I, the Lord, have rejected them. Wow. The whole oracle, starting in verse 27, the whole chapter is a very, very strong chapter of God's concern for the purity of his people. All he wanted to do was to see his people respond to him, listen to his word, accept the chastening hand. God's people was formed to live for his glory, but like we find all through the Old Testament and the New Testament, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And yet God calls his people to, especially his redeemed people, to do whatever they do, whether they eat or drink or whatever they do, to do all for his glory. Here is not the case. But this very message is part of the refining process. We'll check back with us soon as we begin a new chapter, chapter 7, in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.